Hello, my name is Ruben Azocar. I'm a physician and also a board member of Samaritans, an organization devoted to the prevention of suicide and to provide solace to those who have lost a loved one to suicide. I want to be talking about filling Fenway Park with hope today. And when I'll do that, I'll tell you 3 stories. The first story started in Cook County Hospital when I was a fellow in critical care. And I took call on a Friday night, and Saturday morning around 6 a.m., my wife paged me with this message that was 911, which was our code to get in contact right away. We didn't have cell phones at the time. And when I called her, she said, "You had to come right away. Something happened back home. You need to come." And when I made it home, she was crying, and she let me know that my brother, who had turned 18 a few days back, had died by suicide. I've been living in Boston for close to 30 years, and I'm a very devoted fan to the Red Sox. And Fenway Park is our temple here. And Fenway Park holds about 37,000 people in full capacity. There are 50,000 people who died by suicide in the USA. So a lot more than a Fenway Park on a Sunday afternoon at full capacity. Suicide is the 11th cause of death in the US. That means that every 11 minutes, somebody dies by suicide. As a matter of fact, 50% of us will be touched by suicide in our lifetime. So also, about 90% of people who die by suicide can be recognized to have either a chronic or an acute mental health issue at the time they died. So why I'm so passionate about this, and why did I decide to join the Samaritans? First, because the young are at high risk for suicide. And there was my brother. So Ricardo was only 18, and suicide is the second leading cause of death on those between 10 and 14. 2021, 30% of teenage girls had considered suicide. Suicide have rose in young blacks about 70% from the early 90s to 2017, and has also increased, and is the second cause of death on Hispanics between the ages of 15 and 35. Which brings me to my second reason why I'm so passionate about this, which is my Latino heritage. Despite my heavy Boston accent and living in Boston for 30 years, I'm from Caracas, Venezuela, so I'm of Latino heritage. And what we would have seen in this demographic group is that suicide had increased 70% among Hispanics, yet 50% of Hispanics did not get access to mental health in 2018 when they needed to do so. And also suicide have risen significantly across high school students in the Latino population. And the third reason why I'm so passionate about this, as I mentioned at the beginning, I'm a physician, and my specialty is anesthesiology and critical care. And almost 20 years after my brother's death, I received this text when I arrived in the morning to the hospital where I was the head of the service. So Dr. A, Dr. X have not arrived. We're waiting for her. Not a pager anymore. I got on my iPhone. And that moment I knew that she would have died by suicide. 300 to 400 physicians die by suicide every year in the United States. That's about 2 medical school classes. Male physicians have a higher risk, 1.5 times. than the general population. Females have even a higher risk, about 2.5 times. Among medical students, it's 11% of ideation about suicide during the years they're going through medical school. So it's a problem that is prevalent across physicians and other healthcare workers. Anesthesiologists, psychiatrists, and emergency doctors have even a higher incidence. Entering into the last part of this talk, I'm going to talk about 3 S's that I would love you to remember after this talk. The first talk is know the signs. So things that you could see in somebody that's working with you or your family member or your friend. They might be verbal statements. Nobody will miss me if I'm gone. I don't care about what is going to happen next year. Also physical changes. All of a sudden somebody who dresses well is disabled or gains weight or loses weight. And also acting differently. Either sometimes we think maybe they were a little blue, but sometimes also the euphoric state might be an indication. Engaging on high-risk activities, pursuing guns, and somebody who normally doesn't do that might be also signs. So it's important to recognize among the people among us where things could be different, and there might be a sign that something's happening. And also the risk. So people with a family history of suicide might have a higher risk. I mentioned issues of mental health before. Anxiety, depression might be the most prevalent ones. Substance abuse, alcohol, drugs might play a role. Substantial losses or trauma. So you lost your loved one, had a financial crisis, had traumatic events in your childhood, abuse by a loved one, all things that can prompt that. And there are risk groups. I talk about physicians, I talk about the youth, but also veterinarians, construction workers, which brings also very close attention to me because my son is in construction. Veterans, the elderly. So there are other groups where there is a high risk of suicide than the general population. In the group of physicians, we have some additional risks. So change of status, so all of a sudden you were the chairman of anesthesiology in a prestigious Boston University, and you no longer are. Adverse event, so you had a bad event, maybe lost a patient, and that has a very heavy emotional weight. And also litigation, because those processes tend to be long, protracted, and very emotionally charged. It brings me to the second S, which is the stigma, and also the third story. So my brother died on a Friday night, and my wife had arranged everything for us to travel back home to Caracas, and we got there close to midnight on that Saturday. And my father was waiting for us in front of the funeral home. And the first thing he said was, "This was a car accident. Do not mention suicide." So suicides carry a tremendous stigma that is social. Probably the case on my father, who had some political connections, and having a son die by suicide was probably not something that he wouldn't be proud to speak about. Religious. I'm a Catholic. If you die by suicide, you go to the purgatory or somewhere else, and other religions too might have similar things. We can also change the way we talk and talk about die by suicide, because when we say commit suicide, implies a crime or a sin, or something like the person did something bad. And I think it's very important to learn more and talk more about it. So there's been the conception that if you talk about suicide, you can generate or put somebody in somebody's mind the idea of suicide, which is probably the opposite. So breaking the stigma is the second S. And the final S is support. Remember, you're not alone, and there is a nationwide hotline that you can call 24/7, 365 and 988. There are suicide prevention organizations like Samaritans, which I'm, as I mentioned, a part of the board. And you can visit SamaritansHope.org. We have all the information of all the programs, opportunities, and events that we have. And the key is not only prevent suicide, but as I mentioned, provide support for those that are left behind. And then I think there's also the opportunity through those societies to learn and talk more about suicide. So suicide is a public and mental health problem. It's important to recognize high-risk groups and mention two in specific, but I also mention some others that you should consider. Recognize the signs, break the stigma, provide support. So in that way, we may be able to fill Fenway Park with hope. Thank you very much for your attention.